Mrs. Bush, there was a speech that you made in 2005, April of 2005, that you're well known for. It was a surprise to everybody. How long was that in the planning? What was the speech, and how long was that in the planning?
George always says he's delighted to come to these press dinners. Baloney.
Well, that was to the White House Correspondents Dinner, the famous dinner, where, as George says, everyone comes in and makes fun of the president, and then the president comes on and makes fun of himself. And so George had given actually very funny speeches. George is very funny, and he'd been very funny at every one of those White House Correspondents Dinners. And there's not just the White House Correspondents Dinner, there's also the Gridiron Dinner and the Alfalfa Dinner and the Photographer's Dinner. There are a lot of dinners where the president has to have a funny speech and make fun of himself. So that year, George said, I think, I can't even come up with another joke. Why don't you do it this year? So I said, okay.
Did you say okay right away?
Yeah, I knew that I would have, obviously you work with joke writers, everyone does work with joke writers for that speech, and that it would be funny, and it was funny, and I think it was shocking to people as well. I remember I was sitting next to the president of the White House White House Correspondents, who obviously didn't know I was going to spring up, and so George stands up and, makes some joke, tries to make some sort of lame joke, and I jump up and push him out of the way and say, no, not that old joke again. And when I did it, the people that were sitting by me gasped. They were they were shocked. I mean, I think they thought something was wrong, that I was jumping up like that to move over to the podium. But it was fun. But anyway, that's when I called myself a desperate housewife. And it was funny in the United States, and everyone understands it, I think, and knows that that's a roast, and that's, what every one of those White House Correspondents' Dinners are like, everyone making fun of the president. But the people from overseas were shocked, I think. And after that, when we would travel overseas, some world leader would say, "Are you a desperate housewife?"
I am married to the President of the United States, and here's our typical evening. 9 o'clock. Mr. Excitement here is sound asleep. And I'm watching Desperate Housewives. With Lynn Cheney. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a desperate housewife. I mean, if those women on that show think they're desperate, they ought to be with George.
I think you also compared your mother-in-law to Don Corleone in that speech.
Exactly.
What was her reaction?
You'll have to ask her.